come to the one that kind of working on in class. There's some new things in here we haven't talked about, but I'm going to hide everything real quick. I'm going to hide it all, come back into here, get rid of my lighting real quick, close tab. We'll just get rid of all this stuff, close tab. So we still have it all in there, it's just invisible, and then I can just add a new particle system real quick. But one of the things I want to point out is that I have this whole folder called particle systems inside this view. I want to show you where I got this real quick before we go any further into it. Is all we have to do is we have to get this from the store. It's free. So we just come into here, we say the asset store. It'll open up this view right here. And then we're going to type in here, standard assets. And then we're going to say, oops, right there. We want this one that looks like it's a model kit. So we're going to click on it. And then I've already downloaded it, so it's going to not give me the option. But when you download it, you're going to get the option to pick from everything. And all you want to pick is the particle systems. And I'll attach an image with the homework so you can see just that. But it just want the particle. There's going to be a ton of stuff. Do not import all the stuff. This is an old version. This is not the newest version, so it actually causes errors. Even stuff you're not using that's just sitting in here will cause errors. So don't use that one. Just grab the particle systems folder. There's a lot of it, just the particle systems. I can't emphasize that enough. I've gone through this back and forth. So after you download that and install it, it'll be in here. You'll have this particle system folder, which is good because it's going to have a bunch of materials and prefabs and shaders and textures and stuff. So let's get back to this. I'm going to put a material in here. I'm going to do this from scratch again. Right click, say, I always miss it, effects, particle system, and bam. So we have our thing back. We're going to, we could change all this again. I'm not going to go too crazy about it. I just want to show you what the texture maps do. So right now the renderer is set to this HD default. And if I come up here and I look at this texture, this one, you'll see that I don't have a lot of options again. So I got to make a new material. So I'm going to come to my geo. And here, the cool thing is I'm not going to expect you to make new materials because you'll see why in a few minutes, but you can for some stuff. But even the materials you use are going to be super simple in most cases. Some of them are a little bit more complicated, and we'll talk about those. But we're going to come in here. We're going to say create material, and then we can look inside of this, and you'll see that when I go to particles, I have a bunch of different options. That was what I was looking for. That's what I must have deleted. So we're going to say additive blended like this, and then we have this new material. And what we'll do is we'll name this new material particle test. Okay. I'm not getting heavily into this because I'm more worried about you getting jobs. But if you get really good at this and you really enjoy it, go for it. There's a lot of jobs out there for particle systems people. It's not something that's sought after. Really good animators do this kind of stuff, and really good people who enjoy this stuff. They usually start from the animation because they understand the animation and stuff better. But it doesn't mean you can't do it either. Okay, so particle test, we're going to call it that. We're going to come over to our material. It's this color. We can change it to whatever color we want, but we're going to go just to white for right now. I'm going to come back to our particle, and we're going to come down to where it says render default, and we're going to grab that particle test and throw it into that right there. And you'll see it changes the material that's being used down here, which is great. What you can do now is with this color, you could actually change it to red, and it'll add to the red. Now, what happens if you change that to red and you change this to blue? You get purple. Since this is alpha halfway through, if I go all the way up, it's going to be a little bit stronger, but they're still overlapping. That's what the additive is. It's adding those two together. So, if I put the blue, it's going to be really dark and when it adds to the background. So we'll go back to white for this. And then what you can do too is this right here also has that drop down thing. And you can say between two colors, or you can do a gradient. And if you do a gradient, if you click on it, then you get a gradient controller. And I'll do something like this. Let's do this. So you'll see it takes a second to reset, but let me change this one to red so we can see a big difference. And then we'll change this one to a purple. And then, let's change this one, which is, I'll talk about transparency. into a yellow. And you'll notice that the yellow one starts here and goes out to the red, and then as they start living longer, as the particle starts generating more, this is going to change out. So what this does is change the actual texture, the color of the object as it's exported out of, or the particles as it's exported out of the base. So sometimes that's great, sometimes that's not. So what we may want is, what I'll do is I'll reset this to a single color, and we'll change it to something like white. What we may want is we want a particle to change color over time, and that's where all these things come into play. So I'll come into here and I'll say color over lifetime. I'll click on that and you'll see that I've got this automatically, I've got a gradient. Or I can even say random between two gradients, so I can pick two different color sets and get something cool. Let's do one first. We'll just do another dot here, and we're going to say this one is going to be the yellow, like this. This one is going to be the blue, like this. Oops. And this one is going to be the red, like that. And if we pull back, apparently I didn't push the red, but if we pull back, oh, I lost my dot. If you don't have a dot here, all you have to do is click here and add a new one. Double click on it, brings up the color, grab the color you want. Oh, I keep doing that. It's one of the new things that are annoying me right now. There, now I have those three colors. And you can see it changes those three colors. Now I can come in here and say between two, so I can say instead of that, I want this second one to be, you can see it's already pushing the whites on top of them. So I want this second one, we'll say to be green, just to be as awful as possible. And then the second color down here, to say okay, and then come back to this one. And we'll say, oh, purple. Like that. So now you're going to get all those colors of the rainbow. It's going to start at green and go to purple, or it's going to start at yellow and go through blue to red. Okay, just a random color set here. And this is how you do that. You can also, I should point out, these are also transparency. So white means it's opaque. If I turn this down to, let me change this back to 1 actually. Let's just do 1 gradient. If I change this to, let's say, transparent in the middle, I double click on this one, you can see that I've selected this one, it's highlighted, turn the alpha down to like that, and now it should be more transparent in the middle as we look at it. More than likely the way you do it is more, this goes up here, take that one off, just dragging down, and this one goes here, that one to the middle, like that. So, and then we take this and do it to 50. Actually, it should be, oh, that's right, it's the overlay of color. So you can also do other things like the speed it goes over time. You can limit the velocity, which means the controls the velocity, limit the dampening of each particle over lifetime. You can say color of speed, the speed changes by the speed color. Life over time, you can change the size. So instead of getting smaller or like this, you can just click this, click this, and say it gets bigger as it goes over time, as you can see. We should probably put that gravity back on to 0.1. We'll give you some more length of the lifetime here to 7. There we go. And then we're getting this particle. And we're also going to move that emission up to 20, just so we get something that's seeable. We're going to give their lifetime to 10 again. And we'll do our speed to 7. And then we'll come back to our shape and change the cone to be a tighter cone so we get more like this. And then we'll rotate it kind of like we did. And now it'll start feeling like it's coming over. Okay. And we're going to change R to 50. There we go. Okay. So that's how particles in general work. There's a lot of little setup stuff inside of here, but I'm going to keep going over some of this. I'm not done. But there's other things you can do too. And that's the reason I like for you to all come in here and use this prefabs. And we'll talk about prefabs a little bit, but prefabs are basically pre-designed particle systems. And if I drag a particle system like, and I'll just delete this beauty right here, we'll just hide it in case I want to look at it for something else. I'll come in here and I'll go to the prefabs. I'm going to go fire, complex. I'll just throw it in the scene. And then I'll go F to find it. and you'll see nothing happens, but as I start clicking on different parts of this particle, you'll see they're all inside of here. And they have this little arrow right here, which makes me be able to go inside of the prefab and look at them specifically and mess it for everything. Ignore that saying, I think that's in the old version. This is just an example of how it works. It's not necessarily what's going to happen every time. Okay, the reason that popped up, I think, is because, again, I took this from an older system. They're updating currently the newest one, so you just discard changes. But if you make your changes, it'll be changed for everywhere that particle system's used throughout the whole game, or wherever you're using this for. So let's take a look at this fire. No, let's take a look at flames. Flames is a good one. I'm going to stop everything. Make sure I come back to fire and stop it. Go to flames. Let's take a look at this flame. I recently changed the flame from the standard color that it used to just modified the flame texture that it was using. So let me grab that correct one here. I'll throw it in there. Now, there's a flame. So obviously it looks like it's a picture, or somebody made it in a particle system, and those are all both great things to do. Not a particle system in here, but actually a particle systems that for movies and stuff. So you can make your really good, there's some really cool particle systems. They all work technically the same way, but they're just more complex. So now I've got this particle, and it looks like it's changing shape. What am I actually looking at? Well, let's take a look and see if we can see the outline. There we go. Those are the planes that are being shot. And by the way, as I turn around, it's just a simple plane, and it just stays in the same position. So those are the planes going up, and we're just looking at simple planes. It's not actually building all these flame licks and all that stuff. What it is if we look at this texture, is it's a bunch of frames of an animation that sit on top of each other, and it plays through it. And this is called a sprite sheet, or they call it a particle flame sheet. I think that's just the name of it. Yeah. It's a sprite sheet. Basically, it's an animation sheet that allows you to pick from all of these frames to go to the next part. So how do we mess with that? Well, there's a couple things. First, we want to look at this. The particle flames is using the proper material. If I change the material, as you saw a second ago, it changes it for everything that's using this particle flame. So if I wanted to make a colorless particle flame material, I'd need to make a new material if I didn't want it to change the standard one. The next thing we're going to look at is distance. All this stuff is playing. You're fine. This fudging stuff's pretty good. But here it is right up here. Texture sheet animation. You'll see it's set to 8 by 4, and that's because there's 8 across by 4 down. So if we change this, for example, to 4 by 4, we're going to get some weirdness going on. It's going to take this image and do 4 of these across instead of 8. So right now it's evenly spaced out, and there's a trick to making these, and there's a plan to making these. It's evenly spaced out, so they're exactly right. If I took a picture of these all in a row, so if I change that number, obviously something like 5, it's going to be weird because it's grabbing parts that aren't actually there, or it's cutting half of them, and cutting the pictures in half. If I change this to 2, and then I change this back to 8, it's going to be cutting it in half again. So if I wanted a 2 by 8, I'd need to make an image that has 2 rows, or 2 columns by 8 rows. So, but that's not what we're doing. We're just showing how it works, and we'll say 5 or 8 by 4 here, like that. And then what you do is you add more layers of particles to it. But rather than show you on here on an empty world, let me go show you how it was, how I was playing with it in the chapel here. So I'll come back to the chapel. I'll make everything visible here real quick. So we have our chapel back, and I actually had a fire complex I was playing with. So I'll come back in here. Ignore the lighting. I was just playing with some lighting stuff. Make sure I turn all these on. And then we're going to come over to it and say F or not. And there's our particle system with our white fire. Let's go ahead and turn this outline off. So I've got it set up, and then if we look at what it's doing, we've got the fire, which is just the glow in the middle. It's just this explosion thing. And if we take a look at this renderer, we'll see that the actual texture is just this explosion, and it's repeating itself. It's not a texture sheet or anything like that. Then we've got our flames, which is the texture sheet. Then we've got our glow, which is just a glowing ember thing going up here. Let me see if I can turn this a little bit stronger to see. They're not great. Then we can have smoke dark, which if we look at it is just dark smoke going up in the air. And if we go back to glow, maybe you can see better from this direction. It's just another enhancement to make the smoke look better. Smoke lit is a lighter version of the smoke. So if you put those two together, you get this light and dark smoke, and you put the glow on it, and you get this underside glow feel sometimes that pop in. If we look at smoke, smoke is just a texture map that looks like this with the alpha really cutting out everything but that area. And I bet you, no, probably not. It's probably, oops. It's the white one. So they're using the white and the black, so you'll get negative and positive that way. Sparks falling, I turn these off usually just because I wasn't crazy about how they looked. They're just a little bit too intense for me. You can just turn them down. But sparks falling, sparks rising, so they feel like embers going up into the sky, which is cool, but I didn't like the way they didn't match the flow. So the last thing is there's a light in here. So this cool thing about this is we can put a light inside of the particle system, anything actually, and it'll work like that. So if we put them all together and we use the right flames texture here, we put them all together and it's lit correctly, we can get some really cool stuff. So if you wanted this to be a fire, you could, use that to, a torch. You could put this on the top of a torch, which is kind of what we're going to do in class. So the homework is going to be to use this fire, put it on a torch, and put it in the two areas where the areas that are lit in the environment. All right, so that's all particles in a nutshell. Like I said, it goes on and on and on. There's a lot of different things. There's even a new particle type system inside of here for larger images and larger scale stuff. I haven't even gotten to that yet, but it's cool, and let's just move forward and go ahead.